Good morning, everybody. Thank you for waking up. I hope everyone has coffee and caffeine, and hopefully, after Kumar's very entertaining and fascinating introduction here, we'll keep the entertainment going along. So, I'm Ari Berman, CEO of BioIT, and it's my distinct pleasure to introduce my friend David Hewlett. He spends most of his time as an actor and a tech nerd, and a science advocate, a father, a reluctant dog owner, and he's a motivating heckler of internet trolls. He's out there, being super positive, but still, shutting that stuff down. You may know him from probably his most famous role as Dr. Rodney McKay from Stargate SG-1, Stargate Atlantis, Stargate Universe. He's also starred in movies like A Shape of Water and shows on Apple TV such as See and Cabinet of Curiosities. He spends a lot of his time on social media, fostering a sense of empowerment and wonder in science and technology through his Tech Bandits group, really encouraging curiosity and wonder in STEAM. David and I, that's sort of our origin story, met super randomly on Twitter, and I won't call it by its new name, sorry. And I posted something about, HPC, tech and science or something, and he randomly followed me. And so I DM'd him. I was like, hey, thanks for the follow. He's like, oh, no worry, I love, science and tech. And then I was like, oh, what the hell? Hey, you want to talk sometime? And he's like, sure. So we got on and we Zoomed and we talked and talked and talked and talked and talked and talked and randomly became, good friends. And so, one of the things that was fascinating about that is that his role as Rodney McKay, and I know I'm not alone here, really helped inspire me actually to pursue science as a career in a lot of ways. His particular brand of, and he'll probably say this, cowardly confidence, is super relatable to a lot of us. He somehow made this super smart, ultra arrogant genius character endearing and lovable. I still don't know how you did that. Today, though, he really has been trying to foster this crossover between science and technology, and so Cindy Crownenshield, said, really on a mission to bridge the gap between real and real. And so his extensive experience in Hollywood and a passion for all things scientific, he's uniquely positioned to guide us through the labyrinth of misinformation that often plagues social media and the silver screen. Today, he's going to unveil challenges and opportunities presented by platforms like YouTube and TikTok, where science fiction often blurs the lines with scientific fact. And so, join us as David Hewlett takes us on a journey from behind the sofa, where he, as a 4-year-old, dreamt of battling Daleks with Doctor Who, to the forefront of scientific innovation. His infectious enthusiasm, combined with his mantra to be brave, be kind, be curious, will leave you inspired and ready to tackle challenges of tomorrow. David, come on up.
I have much to say now, really. Wow, this is some fun stuff to follow up on, I've got to say. Thank you so much, first off, Cindy, for making this happen. This whole thing, you and your team, it's just extraordinary how you do this. I mean, normally these events for me, are full of people dressed as aliens and as robots and stuff. But I get the feeling this is a little more difficult to contend with, strangely. So, all right, I'm going to attempt. I was saying one of the greatest dangers you can do is hand an actor a PowerPoint presentation. So this could be very interesting. I've watched a number of the keynotes, a number of the speeches here, really, really enjoyed it. You actually have slides that you need. I just get to pick them. So this should be interesting. So my son, let's see if I get this right. So my son said, Dad, you're going to be fine as long as you don't tell one of your bad jokes. So I actually have two, which I feel tie together what I'm going to talk about today. And the first one is, how many bioengineers does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is 1. They need to design a light bulb that can climb the wall, crawl across, consume the old light bulb, and then screw themselves in. And then I had AI do that for me. It's kind of fun. Sorry, generative. I apologize. And then the next was, how many actors does it take to screw in a light bulb? And the answer again is one. They just hold the light bulb, and the whole world revolves around them. And so what I am hoping to do today is to inspire you to get the world revolving around you more, with a few sort of tips and tricks and silly things that I've picked up in pretending to be a genius for a living. So you've heard of imposter syndrome. I don't know whether that happens here. You all know so much. Maybe it's not an issue for you. But this sense that you are just pretending, even though you've accomplished these amazing things. Do people get this imposter syndrome here? Is that show of hands? Yeah. Oh, very good. Well, so some people are awake. That's good. Well, I'm literally an imposter. Like there's no syndrome. I pretend to be brilliant as a day job. I lie for a living. And I have had the fortunate pleasure of playing this gentleman here, this Dr. Rodney McKay, who has sort of personified science for people, to good and bad. Rodney McKay says things like, difficult takes a few seconds, impossible a few minutes, which reminded me actually of Dan's talk, where he talked about this need to speed up the process of processing these massive amounts of data. So way ahead of him on that, apparently. So. So for a number of years, I had the pleasure of exploring, new worlds and getting into lots of trouble. What I loved about Stargate and the power of this show was that it was something that was watched by families. So I would have grandparents and parents and kids coming up at these conventions, usually dressed as something I didn't recognize, and they watched this as a family, which for me was a big part of my growing up. So some of you may recognize the gentleman in the middle there. That was Jason before he was Jason Momoa, together we fought a number of interesting villains and touched on a lot of interesting scientific thoughts about the science and the future. So Jason and I got along quite well. Enjoyed the process. I got to give you a quick story about meeting him. I met him for the first time. I was hanging upside down from a tree. I was wearing a hazmat suit. It was pouring with rain. It was freezing cold, and we're in the middle of a forest. And the actor who I was working with could not remember his lines. And I'm hanging there, and eventually I was slightly less than polite, and I told him to shut up, move his mouth, and I would say my lines, and they could put his in later, in a bid to just get home and get warm. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw this sudden flurried movement. I looked, and there was Jason. And our eyes met, and he suddenly sort of grabbed the script and took off. And I was like, that's an odd, the new kid's a bit odd. And I found out later, he did an interview, and he said, yeah, my first day on set, and I was like, I got to know my lines. I don't want the fat guy mad at me. And so that was my introduction to Jason. He's gone on to a few other things since then. I mean, I feel a bit bad for him. It's all been downhill. And this, by the way, on the left side, this is me. I made Jason act as an intelligent AI, partially biological, partially silicone, future idea of AI. So I'm contributing to all the problems I'm about to talk about. My wife also said if I'm running into any problems, just put up a photo of Jason, preferably without a shirt. I think I've avoided that. I'm hoping to avoid that today, anyways. So one of the amazing things about playing a genius on television is you get to meet real geniuses, which was just eye-opening to me. I have always been a complete nerd. I was dragged into acting and pulled away from science, and it's something that's always frustrated me. I was going home and finding old televisions and trying to fix them and doing science experiments. I didn't know they were science experiments. So I just thought I was playing, and yet at school they were like, "You are an idiot. You need to be on stage goofing around like you do." So there's this odd sort of split that happened to be in education, which I've never forgiven them for. And now they're gonna get their comeuppance now. So I get to meet real geniuses doing this stuff, and I don't just mean myself from an alternate universe, although still one of my favorite actors to work with, I've got to say. Actually, funny story on that one, the poor guy who had to play my double. So there's this whole idea where you basically film a scene with a computer-operated camera, and you just do it twice. You run off and change and come back, and you play both characters. I said, please, please, just get an actor who can talk fast. Because, as you probably noticed, I speak at a certain rate. And they brought in this guy who's like, hey, this is fun. I've never been on a set before. And was just having oh, God, he was loving it. And he talked so slowly that it drove me nuts. But the joke was, oh, my God, Hewlett can't even get along with his double. So yes. But apart from that, I also actually got to meet some real geniuses. This is Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye, the science guy, who were just extraordinary pleasure to work with. As I might say, is Jewel State. If anyone watches Firefly out there, just, oh my God, one of the most brilliant sci-fi shows, and she just plays this fantastic character in it. But Bill Nye, if you go for dinner with Bill Nye, he does science experiments at the table. Like, he's not kidding. There's no pretending there. Things literally ignite. Like, he's asked to leave restaurants because he's set the table on fire. I mean, he's extraordinary, and his passion and his curiosity is just, it's contagious. So it was wonderful, wonderful to meet him. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is just a legend. One of my favorite stories, which is not any comment on him, but it was just I found so amusing, was he didn't realize you couldn't keep the costume. So he went home in his tux, and the wardrobe had to go chasing after him at the airport and say, you can't, we need that. And, but I mean, it sort of makes sense when you think about it. He shows up, they fix the suit to fit him perfectly, and then they take it back. It just doesn't seem to make any sense. So that was the experience working with Neil and Bill. And Bill, I've run into him a few other times. He was instrumental in part of the educational stuff I did, because I was attending a Let's Talk Science, this wonderful charity out of Canada, where they basically take they've sort of just taken on the task of trying to create a massive amount of educational content for kids of all ages across Canada, especially diverse populations, and getting science education to Indigenous populations in remote parts of Canada. Stuff, just an amazing place. Bill was talking at this event, and he sort of came off the stage and went, David, and sort of ran up and gave me this hug, and then sort of wandered off. And this woman came up to me, Bonnie Schmidt, who runs Let's Talk Science, and was like, I think I need to know you. I was like, yes, you do. Of course, because I was friends with Bill Nye, and that just opened up a wonderful opportunity for me to work with someone who actually had some real understanding and experience in working in the educational space. And also, she had the data to back it up, which is wonderful, because I can come up with all the theories I want. She actually had the data. So Let's Talk Science, wonderful charity you should check out. So the other thing that happens with playing a genius on television is that people come up to you and say that you've inspired them into science. I did not know, Ari, I apologize. I had an idea that this was going to be a big part of it, but and it gives you this weird sense of responsibility. Luckily, I'm an actor, so there's not a lot of responsibility there. But it really struck me, and it really became something that I fed on, that I really sort of took to heart, and I've really enjoyed, to the point where Stargate stopped, and I'm like, I'm kind of jonesing for some more of that. Maybe there's a way to extend this beyond just film and TV, and start delving into it in the real world. And and so what I've done, and what this has allowed me to do, is to meet people like Ari and Cindy, and start. It helps fuel my sort of passion and my excitement about science and technology, and then I can hopefully pass that on to the next generation of brilliant minds of any age. Because this is the other thing, is I find it's wonderful to be able to inspire kids. I think that's obviously a big part of what all of us do in our lives. But also, there's people, especially during the pandemic, I noticed there are people who have made changes in their life, who suddenly go, wait a second, I'm climbing the wrong ladder here. And they suddenly find themselves, they want to go to education, or they want to go into the sciences or the arts or whatever. And so it's just been sort of fascinating being sort of helping to sort of as a catalyst for that kind of stuff. These guys, I think, are the reason for that. And Cindy and I were talking about this last night. Cindy's doctor only just came on, a couple of years ago, but mine was very, very long ago. And it was this guy, John Pertwee and Tom Baker. And this show was this wonderful British science fiction where every alien they encountered had a British accent, which for some reason, never really struck me as. But everybody was, "Hello, doctor," no matter where they came from. These aliens would come up and threaten him with some kind of a London brogue of some sort. But the funny thing about this show in Canada was the only way I could get it was on TVO. And TVO was a public television that had a mandate for education in the 70s, and it still does. And so what they did was, because it was a half-hour British show, they had a chunk of time at the end that they had to fill. And they filled it with these crazy looking 70s dudes. Dr. Data and Judith Merrill, the Undoctor. And they would talk about, admittedly, sometimes it was just like, well, that's stupid, which I loved as well. How do they know what button to turn? But most of the time it was about, hey, that whole black hole thing. You want to know how that works? So that's something to look into. I was as enamored with the after show as I was with the show itself, because I'm like, oh my God, this is cool, and some of it's real, or it could be real. And it just inspired me to build things and to read things and to the first books. I never read. I was the laziest kid around. I'm an actor. And the Doctor Who books, I read like 150 Doctor Who books just because I couldn't get enough of this stuff. And a big part of it was because Judith and Dr. Data were telling me that there was further I could go. We just scratched the surface with this stuff. So there's a definition of science fiction, which I absolutely love, which is from Etienne Auger. And he says, science fiction is about exploring the dangers and opportunities of science and technology. That seems pretty obvious. But then he says, it has much about preventing futures as it is about inventing them. And that really struck me, because you suddenly go, it is important. Again, I don't want to put too much, yes, what I do is very important. But I think what's interesting is it was described to me by this wonderful man who runs, who works with, I think he actually runs OpenBCI's brain-computer interface company. And he said that science fiction is the first stage of engineering. It is the dreaming phase. And it is, I think that is a wonderful, wonderful way to put it, but it comes with a few issues. I'm going to start with this one. My son is a liar. I love this. My dad, again, my son begged me not to do this, but I get a knock on the door one day, and there's a kid at the door, and literally said to me, "Your son is a liar." And being the good parent I am, I'm like, oh God, what did he do? And he proceeded to explain that he claimed we were building a gaming PC, and everyone knows no one can do that. And I was like, oh no, we're in the basement now doing it right now. So this kid came down, and I was forcing my poor son. I said, if you want to play video games, you have to learn you have to build a computer. So we built a computer together. I could not get it working. I couldn't do it. I had friends. I have a guy who basically ran the nuclear side of a nuclear submarine on Zoom, going like, why wasn't it working? And we couldn't figure it out. And these kids showed up and they start playing with it. I'm like, guys, this is very valuable, expensive technology. Stop. And they got it working. They have never forgotten that. This kid has never forgotten that. So I thought, wait a second, I think I might be onto something here. These kids didn't know that you could open this technology, that you could explore this stuff. This is something I did just innately as a kid. I would tear stuff apart. Admittedly, I've learned later that it's better to do it with things that are already broken as opposed to things that are working or were working. My poor parents, it's like, they would, I would say, beg for these little early computer games and stuff, and I'd have them in pieces by the evening, the first evening that I had them. I've since learned that there's a what I call geek trash. So what I do is I go around my neighborhood, which is a nice neighborhood in Toronto, highly recommend it, Greek town, wonderful place. and they throw out the most amazing things. I have found a robot. I found a Roomba in the garbage. And to me, I was like, we've reached a point in society where robots are disposable? This is amazing. I, of course, brought it home. My wife says, of all of my foibles, her least favorite is the garbage, as she puts it. Actually, I had a very interesting chat with a friend of mine who actually turned out to watch Stargate, and was just so amused at the thought that someone was going to look out their window one day and see the guy from Stargate in their trash. You know, in the where are they now category. He's in my garbage right now. So I would just grab old tech. I learned very quickly you need to clean them first before you take them to schools. Otherwise, other things arrive at school as well. We had a real unfortunate incident where we opened one and there was a lot of spiders in there. I have definitely warped a few young minds with that one, and me too, for that matter. It is amazing how dirty old computers can get. Anyway, so I started cleaning the technology. I found a lot of printers. They love taking apart printers. But at first, they're incredibly tentative about this stuff. Like, what if I break it? I'm like, dude, it's broken. It is not getting, and so what do? They put a screwdriver through the screen, and you go, okay, well, maybe not that broken. Maybe we want to hold off on that side of stuff. So you start setting a few little ground rules, but I tried to do as few as possible, and I tried to just let them go. And they didn't have to put it together again, and I told them they didn't have to put it together again. I did end up making a rule, you can't cut cables. I said, there's always another screw, and you can't cut cables. So, find a way to pull this stuff apart. And by pulling it apart, they got so excited. My favorite, I think the most rewarding part of doing this stuff was when a kid opened up an old laptop and went, oh my God, there's a whole world in here. And I was like, that's how I felt. Like, that's how I felt looking at this stuff. And I thought, well, how do I make this stuff interesting? Because my kid, perfect example, nice kid, smart kid, but he went into school so curious and so excited about everything. And by grade 4, it's like, learning's boring. And I was like, oh God, this is me all over again. I'm a high school dropout who plays geniuses on television, and I'm seeing it happen all over again. Oh God, my son's gonna become an actor. No, I think I've got that out of his, But anyways, I was concerned again with his friends showing up and claiming not to know that they could build PCs and stuff. And so I started bringing this stuff in. I started just casually mentioning what things were, because I realized that all those things that I broke as a kid was a learning process. I was teaching myself how these things worked, and learning about all these components in a way that I couldn't get from school. I just couldn't. It just didn't work for me. So on the right here, we've got, I'll call her Sam to protect her identity. I like to put just raccoon eyes on the kids instead of weird. It always feels a bit like I'm at a crime scene if they've got the big black marks in front of their faces. So Sam here, Sam was one of my first tech bandits that I did at the elementary school. And I never saw Sam. Like, for the first, I guess, 4 or 5 classes, never saw her. She was short, she was quiet, she was at the back, always in these big baggy sweaters. And then I brought this little robotic arm in, and we started playing around with it. And I showed them that they could actually take this simple little toy and control it with an Arduino and a computer. And she came, pushing up to the front, and she said, that's a robotic arm? I was like, yeah. She goes, I've got a robotic arm. I was like, you do? That's great. Thinking like she's got a toy like this at home. She goes, it's in my locker. I was like, well, what's it doing in your locker? Get it, go down and get it. So she goes down and gets it. She brings her prosthetic arm up and puts it on the table and then pulls out a screwdriver. And I'm like, whoa, no. Let's not take apart, And I found out, I talked to their parents. Their parents came up to me in the ice cream shop a few months later. They said, you're the robot guy. I'm thinking like, yes, I am. You've probably seen me on television. She goes, no, it's cool. You're the robot guy. I'm like, oh, I guess I am. Okay. And she doesn't talk about this partial limb that she has. She wears baggy sweaters, and I literally didn't know that this was her situation. I had no idea. She just wore these big long sweaters or long shirts the entire time. And this arm shows up, and she starts coding. And she's just having the best time. Half the code didn't make any sense, but it didn't matter. She was so inspired by this, and that this little arm could do more than the arm that she'd been given, that didn't match her skin, that didn't match her needs. I mean, she was absolutely taken with that. So that was, and then I was hooked. I was like, oh my God, this is better than Stargate. So I discovered this assistive element to learning. If you can apply assistive stuff, the kids go, oh my God, I can make a difference, and they can see a direct correlation with pulling apart old computers, old printers, and then building little arms and creating their own little science project. It made just this massive difference. And to myself as well, because you suddenly go, oh my God, this actually can have an impact, beyond just this, elementary school. So, again, I start bringing in these computers. There was a teacher, my poor wife, there was a teacher strike. And as part of the result of that was that we weren't allowed to do Tech Bandits at school because then we would be scabs or something. So I did it in our basement. So in our basement, we got like 20 kids and like a field of pizzas and a bunch of microscopes, and we're just looking at bug parts under this microscope. And my wife's like, you really have to figure out something for this, because she's now got 25 extra kids to look after, so including me, so probably 26 actually. Again, taking this stuff apart, not worrying about breaking stuff, and then what I discovered was they really enjoyed categorizing this stuff as well. They loved putting it into little piles and trying to associate stuff, and I didn't tell them what should go with what. I just let them do what they wanted. It was just amazing what they came up with, and they would explain technology that was happening in the computer, and it was completely wrong, absolutely completely wrong. And they would explain it to me, and we'd talk about it, and then we'd figure out what was actually right. And the best thing was, I'm not a teacher. Like, I don't know anything. I'm just an actor. So we just got to look up stuff together. I mean, I've been building PCs since I was since Doctor Who, basically, since as soon as they were available, and then taking them apart. So I have a certain amount of understanding of this stuff, but I don't, this isn't my realm. And I think there's this wonderful sense of joining them in play, and that is something that kids really respond to, is the idea that, there's no other motive there than I'm having fun, I am enjoying this as much as they are. And that has gone incredibly far. Thanks to Stargate, I met a guy who built a pancake printer. And so I was like, great, let's bring a pancake printer in and we'll print pancakes. And I thought, what a great way to learn 3D printing. Because 3D printing, they say they're teaching 3D printing at school. They bring in a 3D printer and the teachers go, ooh, ah. And the kids are like, okay, this is really boring. Like, when's it gonna be done? And my point was basically like, this is how it works. It's just layers of material that just get put one on top of the other and are delicious. And I did this at a community center near us, which is a very different experience than elementary school. They're terrifying. Like, you're dealing with real teenagers with real attitude. And the one I'm most proud of is this one, the bottom left here. So there's two kids who were so cool. And they had like these amazing fingernails, and they could operate their phone from like a distance with these nails. And they were not interested at all in what was going on. It's like, let the kids play with their stupid pancakes. And next thing I know, they're up there printing an entire McDonald's meal made out of pancakes. Like, literally, there are little fries. They made the packaging for it. They made the bag to put it in. And I'm like, McDonald's? They're like, yeah. I mean, because it's processed food anyways, right? So again, it's just these wonderful little breakthroughs. I mean, for you, if you've got kids, you probably noticed is the One Piece and Chainsaw Man. I mean, a lot of stuff. I did not show you some of the other things that were printed. Because what's the first thing a teenage boy does when he gets... Yeah. I said that to his parents. They were just killing themselves. But, so here's the other thing I did. Like I say, I meet these wonderful, brilliant people. One of this couple that I met, and this is a problem that I have that I'm going to talk about a little later, which is I met them. They watched Stargate, as it turned out, and I said, what do you do? And they said, oh, it's boring. Which basically means like you won't understand. And they sort of shied away from it. And I sort of pursued it a bit, and then I find out that she is an arachnologist with the largest collection of black widow spiders like on the planet. She studies them at the University of Toronto. He is an entomologist who studies the acoustics of insects. And I'm like, and that's boring? I was like, what are you, nuts? So the next thing you know, we're collaborating with them, and we've got maybe a questionable decision. We've got black widows and laser vibrometers at the elementary school. And it was the best. I mean, they'll never let me back, but it was absolutely amazing because we had like 5 or 6 of these things. They were very sure to make sure that I counted them continually. But I was with someone who knew this. He knows these spiders. They're going to leap out. I was terrified of spiders. I couldn't deal with them. These things I fell in love with. I mean, these things had personality. It's like if I was God and I wanted to create a killing machine, that is what I would gunmetal black with a red logo on. I mean, it's genius. So, and what he was doing was he was taking this laser vibrometer, you fire it at the web, you fire it at the spider, and you can hear them. You can hear them sort of like rubbing their mandibles on the web. You can hear them, thunking around in the web. And what he's been using it for is to study how they communicate, how they mate, how they distinguish between prey and a possible date. And this is the stuff he was doing with the kids. And it was extraordinary because there's no room for us in the school. We're in like we're in the hall at lunchtime with 6 black widow spiders in boxes. And this poor principal came in and said, like, shouldn't they have lids on them? And I literally wasn't thinking. I was like, no, you can't fire the laser through then. They can't. The laser doesn't go through the lids very well. But they could get out. I was like, they're not going to get out. Because what if they touch them? I said, well, don't be stupid enough to touch them. So anyway, so I ended up putting a piece of tape that said, you stay behind this line, or you might hurt the spiders, is what I said. But one of the interesting things that came up, and I mentioned this with Ara the other day, or was it maybe possibly Cindy, where one of the kids came up to me and said, "What you're doing is illegal," and I was like, "It is?" And he's like, "Yeah, totally. You can't bring deadly spiders in." I said, "Well, I don't think they're deadly. I think they're potentially dangerous, but they're not deadly." And so what did we do? Well, we went on Google and we looked up whether it was illegal to bring black widow spiders to school. And I talked to Professor Mason, who was the resident specialist, and he was saying what we figured out was that it would be illegal to bring mice into school, right? That you cannot do. Spiders, go for it. But it was amazing how fast word spread around the school. It started with a teacher coming up and saying, like, my students are saying there's black widow spiders. You brought black widow spiders in the school. Could you just, what can I tell them to tell them the truth? And I was like, you can tell them I brought black widow spiders into school. But of course, what happens? All of a sudden, you've got like 50, 60 kids in the hallway who want to see black widow spiders. And you got it on a little screen and you're showing them the laser. They're learning about the Doppler effect. They're learning about spiders. They're oohing and ahhing. We're talking about we're having debates about the legality of this stuff. I mean, this is learning, and it's just play. I mean, it's the most wonderful experience. And I think one of the reasons why I so enjoy the opportunity to sort of connect at these things is because you've all got amazing tech and understanding of the world that I want to know about, because I'm telling you, there's a kid out there whose life is going to be changed by this stuff. And even just for me, I mean, all of a sudden, I don't kill spiders anymore. I put them outside. I pick them up. It's weird. Not the dock spiders. Those things are creepy. Anyways, so I started looking into this more, like trying to formalize this process a bit more. And one of the things I weaseled my way into, I'm a celebrity, don't you know, was the Canada-wide Science Fair. So went out and talked to the kids and did a bunch of interviews for the kids. And here's the thing that I discovered. Grown-ups are in awe. The adults are like, oh my God, they're so smart. My child is a genius. And I'm like, okay, what's the deal? And every single kid I spoke to, let me just first give you an example. This is the kind of stuff that high school students are presenting this is literally just a tiny sampling. I'll probably get in trouble for this, but I scraped a whole ton of data on all of these projects that had been submitted because I really wanted to see where kids' interests were going over time. And I just picked a few of these things just at random. But like a novel approach to preventing mitochondrial disease, high school, right? Optimization of CAR T cell therapy using RNA sequencing analysis for biomarker identification. Again, these kids are, like, some of them are like 15, 16 years old. A novel method. I love that they're all novel methods. Novel method to predict TCR constructs for specific disease biomarkers using deep learning. I mean, you don't get better than that. So I'm like, okay, what's the key? How does it work? Every single one of them said, well, I learned about it on YouTube. And I was like, okay, but what I'd seen with YouTube is people watching YouTube and this illusion of knowledge. They go like, I know Kung Fu. I watched a video on it. You know, my son literally said that to me one day. Great kid. But these kids had gone further. The thing that I noticed was that they didn't just watch the video. They then went, who made that video? Who is that person? What are they doing? And they emailed them. They contacted them. And they were just absolutely fearless in this regard. They're like, they're on YouTube showing me. They obviously want to talk about it, and they called them up. And that is how this stuff started happening. So I was like, okay, I'm onto something now. I need to be pushing for this stuff. So Richard Feynman, wonderful quote, if you can't build it, you don't understand it. And this is something I saw with a lot of kids. They'd watch a video. I would find these amazing YouTube videos, and I'd present it to the kids, and they'd go like, wow, that's amazing. I know everything there is to know about that. And I was like, oh, God, you don't. You don't apply it. So I sought to change that. Your son is a liar? That's the kid. That's him. Let's call him Jack. So Jack accidentally fixed my computer. This is him holding a CPU that he pulled out of one of my geek trash things. On my latest, well, not quite the latest discussion with him, this is what he was doing. I don't know what he was doing. That is capacitor modding GPUs. I looked it up. There's like one guy with 2 videos on YouTube who does this stuff. This guy is literally soldering capacitors to GPUs to try to speed them up, to optimize them, old GPUs. This is a kid who didn't know you could build a PC. Now, his parents are brilliant, wonderful, supportive people, and are absolutely the reason why he is where he is with this stuff. But there's a little part of me that goes like he's my go-to PC guy now. Like when I need to know what new PCs I should be getting, a new tech to invest in, he's the guy I go to. He's my PC guru. So this is the kind of stuff that I think is possible when you sort of embrace the play part of this stuff. When you don't try to teach kids stuff, you just try to learn with them. Because the reality is stuff is changing so fast. We all have to keep learning. It's not you don't get a I don't get a university degree, but you don't get a university degree and just let it go. You got to keep that thing updated. You almost got to like subscribe to it. You just subscribe to lifelong learning. And this kid is kind of glued on this now. Like he's hooked on it. And I can't wait to see what he's going to do. He's doing 3D design for robotics competitions and stuff now. Just some amazing stuff. I should look at the clock. Oh, I've got plenty of time. Great. Oh, you poor people. I've got plenty of time. So this is where I'm going to introduce this idea. My wife is a film producer. Amazing woman. I don't know how she puts up with me, but she her latest film actually is called The Swearing Jar. Yeah, she'll be very embarrassed that I mentioned that, but go check it out. Beautiful musical comedy. Beautiful little film with Kathleen Turner and the guy from Suits. Lovely film. Anyways, so she also teaches a course in producing. And one of the things that she talks about is this log line. And they are obsessed. Hollywood is obsessed with this the elevator pitch log line. They're like, you're gonna find yourself in an elevator with like Tom Cruise, and you're gonna have to pitch that movie, and you gotta be ready all the time for this. And the basic idea is you have a really long run-on sentence that tells and sells your story. You have your protagonist, so obviously who you are. You have your inciting incident, what inspires you, and you have your ultimate goal. What do you want to achieve? And what are the obstacles that are getting in your way? And you weave this into a story that can present yourself to your target in a way that is going to excite them. It's going to make them want to know more about you. And I feel like this is something that maybe scientists and researchers can start using a bit more, because, and it's not just about trying to market. It's not just about trying to sell yourself. It's about telling a story, like adding a personal element to what you're doing. And I think this is kind of a wonderful way of doing it, because it forces you into a structure, and it forces you to consider it a bit like a Hollywood script, which I think could work for you. So there's a few more things I'll get into now. Here's what Hollywood thinks about you. This is basically, when you watch science fiction, this is basically the categories you fall into. And I know this because you may not know me, but I play you on TV. You are well-meaning screw-ups. Like, you are, with the best of intentions, you just want to protect your father from Alzheimer's and that angry neighbor. And in doing so, what do? You unleash a virus that causes the rise of the Planet of the Apes. You know? You just try to do good. That's what happens. I have the dubious. I remember being on a plane once, and I was sitting on the plane, and in the the title sequence at the end of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, my character walks into an airport infected with the virus. And I remember like standing by the bathroom, waiting for the bathroom, and looking down the aisle of this plane, and like every second screen had me spreading the virus on a plane at an airport. You know, while I stood on the plane, I was like, I just couldn't wait for someone to get up and, you know, wait in line with me. Anyways, you know, so either you're a screw up or you got to screw loose. You're nuts. I mean, just look at Spider-Man. I mean, literally every single one of these are scientists who have, with the best of intentions, who just are crazed by the technology and the innovations that you've created or mutated in some way. This is kids' understanding of genetic engineering. Like literally, when you ask them about genetic engineering, they talk about you know, any of the X-Men, Avengers stuff, and they talk about Spider-Man. I mean, the classic example for kids when you talk about genetic engineering, it's Spider-Man. I want to be bitten by a spider and I want to get superpowers. Just they don't want to get bitten by the Black Widows, though, I noticed. You know, so that's how Hollywood sees you. So that's a bit of a problem. I'll tell you why it's a problem, and this really struck me. I don't know if you've heard of this Tom Cruise guy. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. Just out of curiosity, how many people saw that film? Yeah? I want to ask you how many people enjoyed it. But the villain of Mission Impossible is the Entity, which sounds like a movie from the 1960s. Their description of the Entity in Mission Impossible is it's an AI that is a part of a lot of other AIs. And they all get together, and then they get free will, and then they hate Tom Cruise. They want him dead. And that is the villain, which is very amusing. It's wonderful. It's fun. It's available in blue as well. I don't know why there's two slides there. There's a little improv. You know, and this is obviously the world. I mean, I stole this from Ari, by the way. If you're trying to use that in yours, forget it. Yeah. You know, this is AI. It's HAL 9000. It's Skynet. It's Terminator. That is people's understanding of AI. And the AI you're talking about today, you know, it's interesting, we were talking about the radio interview yesterday. So one of the first things that happened was he mentioned that, you know, it's BioIT. And he said, that sounds scary. I was like, what? How does that sound? That doesn't sound exciting to you? That sounds scary to you? This is the problem. And I'll tell you, it's such a big problem because Mission Impossible 7 or whatever it was screened at Camp David for President Biden. And apparently, it was a big reason why he pushed forward with pushing for AI legislation. Mission Impossible 7 is what's got him scared? That makes me very, very worried. Like, we really need to get better at explaining this stuff and making this stuff, you know, personable to people. And this is not the first time it's happened. War games, I'm old. Basically, this is why I love computers. I don't know why I wanted to start a thermonuclear war, but exactly the same thing, screening at Camp David for Ronald Reagan. And the next thing you know, you've got the Cyber Fraud and Abuse Act, and he's freaking out about, you know, Star Wars and the state of defense in America. During the hearings for that, they didn't. I mean, they listened to obviously, you know, the facts. They also played clips from war games as part of the process of coming up with this law. I mean, again, a little worrying. This film, has had the biggest impact on people's attitudes towards climate change. The day after, I would have thought it would be, you know, Inconvenient Truth or something like that. No, this film made more people aware of climate change in the most inaccurate way. I'll tell you, I'm all for climate change if it brings back saber-toothed tigers. Like I'm all for that. But it's a bit worrying. You know, when we talk about AI, don't you love it? AI, generative AI, yeah. You know, they're now talking about lab-grown Frankenmeat bans. So we haven't even started. I mean, it's not even being sold yet. People are already talking about banning it. They're using Frankenmeat as their example. Frankenstein was written 200 years ago by an 18-year-old. And we're still using that to define the technologies, these brilliant technologies that are available today. So that wonderful dream of science fiction for me has sort of hit a bit of a roadblock here. Because instead of accelerating science and driving the future, Hollywood and social media create roadblocks and misinformation in all areas, specifically of BioIT. I mean, like, to be fair, BioIT is just, the reason why I'm so fascinated with BioIT is it has all the fun stuff. Like you got the squishy stuff, you got the robotic stuff, you've got all the AI stuff. It's just, the computer stuff is just amazing. But it can and will affect government policy. So this isn't just like an amusing aside. This is the problem you're facing. And when you start dealing with people's health, they will react very, very strongly to that, unless you can present it in a way that they understand and that they accept. Fear is the mind killer. I've always wanted to put that on a slide. I just feel like, you know, that just it sounds so important, but it really is. You know, we sell fear, and I think it's a laziness. I think it's very easy to just go straight to the Skynet, Terminator, Frankenstein. But by sowing that fear, we're closing people's minds, and it's going to make your job so much more difficult. I think there's a real focus on presenting the data and presenting the you know, all these wonderful things that can happen with these technologies and tools. But if people aren't listening because they've decided it's terrifying and it's too scary to comprehend, you're going to lose them, and it's going to work against you. It's going to make things much, much more difficult. I mean, it's funny listening to some of the talks already just about you know, the managing the data, managing access to data, and all this kind of stuff. A lot of that is because people are just terrified. They're terrified that it's gonna get out there like a giant worm on a faraway planet. All right, so I wasn't sure whether to read this or not. You don't have to read that. That's just there because I'll never remember it. You know, Ari and I were talking about this the other night. Weird coincidence. He's literally got this book in his knapsack. What a nerd. So this is Carl Sagan. This is 1995. Yeah, I've got time. Okay, and I'm just gonna say it to you because this really struck me. Science is more than a body of knowledge; it is a way of thinking. I have a foreboding. This is in 1995 of an America in my children's or grandchildren's time when the United States is a service and information economy, when nearly all key manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries, when awesome technological powers are in the hands of a very few, and no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues. When the people have lost the ability to sell their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority, when clutching our crystals, which just gets me every time, and nervously consulting our horoscopes, our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true, we slide almost without noticing back into superstition and darkness. And I feel like that's happening. I really, really worry about this. I see kids seeing this pseudoscience and just accepting it. There was a wonderful piece on the BBC where they showed them a documentary about the amazing electrical abilities of the pyramids in Egypt, how they generated electricity. Fascinating stuff and entirely untrue. They then interviewed the kids after, and they're like, really? But it seemed like they said it was real. They completely accepted it. You know, and I've fallen for it. I remember in the pandemic, one of the first things I retweeted in the pandemic was a mask made out of copper. It was infused in copper, and copper was going to instantly kill any contaminants in the air, and I completely fell for it. I was like, we got to support this. We got to save the planet until, you know, bad astronomer was a wonderful science friend of mine, was like, dude, that's like totally bogus. I'm like, ah, damn it, I just play smart on TV, as my kid points out a lot. Anyways, it's a bit of a mouthful, but I really think that's worth considering. He saw this coming, and I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it in education too, where we're scared to talk about stuff. They're scared to bring up anything that's going to be controversial. They're worried about alarming the kids. These kids are. I mean, the pandemic is literally just their life. Like that's just what they're used to. We're the ones who are freaking out. Oh my God, they didn't have this. They didn't have that. No, they didn't. They didn't know what they were supposed to. So they're a lot more resilient on this stuff, and I think it's really important we start working on those critical skills and applying this knowledge that they've got instead of just having them learn stuff by rote. So Hollywood and social media are already telling your story for you, and AI-generated content is coming. Like there is going to be a tsunami of pseudoscience and things trying to grab kids' attention. And so what do you do? I remember there's one little story about I remember being at Comic-Con in San Diego, and this poor sci-fi network guy got up there and was like, you have to watch Stargate live. You can't record it, and you can't skip the commercials. I'm like, dude, you're talking to a room of nerds. You know, you're talking to people who are inventing technology to skip your ads. And he comes off and he's like shaking his head and he's like, God, what do we have to do to get people to watch ads? And I was like, make good ads? Like, I watch every movie trailer. You know, I mean, they're fantastic stuff. I mean, you make bad ads, you're going to skip them. Cindy and I were talking the other night about online content. You know, the more polished and professional stuff looks, kids, without even thinking, it's like a switch in their head. They go, oh, ad, and it disappears. You know, they're desperate for this connection. They will watch a kid play a video game for 4 hours because they're connecting with that kid. It's not about the game. I mean, the game obviously comes into play. My wife always complains that that's all the money goes into developing the game, and then the kids get paid to just play it. They get all the special effects and stuff for free. But they're craving that connection. So I think that's something we really need to work on. So now more than ever, science communication is important. You know, because it's so much harder to get heard, and there's going to be so much more noise out there. So how do you do that? I believe, from my experience, trying to apply some silly little Hollywood tricks and tactics to getting kids excited about this stuff, I think this will work on adults to some extent, is make it personal, you know? Add a human connection and tell a great story so you can stand out. And that goes back to that elevator pitch. You know, I don't think it's just about trying to sell your technology. I think it's so important that we know who you are and what you're trying to change and what you're trying to do. Because I come here, and I've been to Boston robotics conventions, I've been to AI and big data conventions. I'm meeting the people doing this stuff, and they're not Skynet. They're not robots. They're not bad AI. They're people who are just trying to make a wonderful difference to the planet using extraordinary, you know, brains and technologies and collaborations. I mean, there's a number of myths in Hollywood that I think we need to work on as well. I played one. That science is done as an individual by snapping your fingers and looking like thinking is very painful, because obviously if it's painful, it's got to be genius. You know, that this is a community. Like, it is a community of people working together. And so one of the things I want to invite you to do, basically, is it's wonderful in this environment. You're comfortable. You're with people who understand what you're doing. But once you get out into the real world, it's very easy to sort of shy away from that stuff and not discuss it and not talk about your personal connection to this stuff. But that's what's gonna bring people in. That's what wins Oscars, right? It's not a few visual effects to bring you in and some spend a lot of money and stuff. But the reality is, what brings people in and what worked for Stargate and what's working for me in the classroom or the hallway or the community center is connection and is play. And I think that if people can see that in what you're doing, it's going to make the process, including the political process and legislation, it's going to make it a lot easier. Because I think right now it's lazy and easy to go straight to the doom and gloom side of stuff. So I think you can afford a few visual effects, but maybe don't overdo it. You know, there's a sense of there's this. I think there's definitely a hype that's necessary. I mean, you need to get people excited about what you're doing. So I don't think you should shy away from that. But honestly, the thing that's going to really hook them is if you make that connection, then you inspire curiosity and excitement instead of fear. And that's, if I can, you know, if that's one thing I can get across today, I think I might have made a little bit of a difference. So this is my favorite quote about this. Like I get shivers when I think about this. You know, great stories happen to those who can tell them. Even though Ira Glass's voice annoys me when I'm trying to listen to him on podcasts, but it's so true. You know, if you don't speak up, if you don't work on your own story and embrace it, all the foibles, all the mistakes, that's what I call them happy accidents in film. When I was directing, when things went wrong, things became so much more exciting. I mean, maybe not at the moment, but once you get into it, it's the things you can't think of. It's all those little nuances and stuff that helps you connect to people that will make selling stuff, funding, and all this stuff. It's going to be. I think you'll find it's just going to be a lot easier. So, and I'll just end with techbandits.org. I seem to have a lot of time, so I can talk about that as well. But so techbandits.org is where really, as I say, during the teacher strike, I moved Tech Bandits into my basement from the hallways. During the pandemic, I went online, and it was startling to me, the difference with that, in a very, very positive way. I started on Zoom, and we would do Zoom meetings, and the kids were just, there was nothing at all. I was like, oh God, I am a failure. Because there was just blank stares or just blank screens, and you could hear the as they're playing their video games in the background. I was like, oh God, this is never gonna work. We're doomed, we're all doomed. And then my son said, well, it's because Zoom's for learning. I was like, yes. And he said, all the cool people use Discord. So I was like, okay, great, set me up. So we went on Discord, and I started using Discord as my means of communication with them. And all of a sudden, sure, there's a lot of video game playing going on. And I stopped taking it personally. As an actor, you want to be the center of attention all the time, as you know. But you know, you sort of have to let that go. And the kids would play video games in the background, and we would talk about stuff. I'd go through a list of things that I thought was interesting. And when something was interesting, you'd hear it. Like, it wasn't always the same kids, but suddenly the clicking would stop, and they'd be like, wait, what? What was that? And you'd go back, and you'd explain it again, and then they would engage. And it was amazing, because I learned about Twitch, I learned about streaming. I started using the tools and the technology that they were playing with for education. But not even just for education. I really, again, feel like this was just about finding connections, because they have access to the entire knowledge of the human race. It's all there. All they have to do is want to look for it. Like, we can't make that work? I see it in school, and I'm like, really? You can't convince my kid to go and look a video up on YouTube? So it's just trying to find those little bursts of inspiration where they'll actually go that further step and actually start looking this stuff up. So one of the things I've stumbled upon on the way was, and this was during the pandemic as well, I had this wonderful nerdy guy who builds escape room traps and stuff. And I'd never done escape rooms. I started researching. I was like, oh, what a nerd. And I started researching it, and there's this one guy in Canada who seems to be like a big Scott Nichols, who seems to be the go-to guy about escape rooms and puzzle learning stuff. And he referenced this film Cube. I was like, hey, I was in Cube. That's like, I'm going to the Calgary Film Festival next week because they're like restoring it. I mean, it's like, it's that old. My son said maybe I should apply for money for my own restoration as well at the time. Maybe a little lift and tuck or something while they're, if they're trying to preserve Canadian heritage. But Cube apparently was the catalyst for a number of these escape rooms. And the thing I discovered, again, online, all of the clicking stopped. Everyone wanted to know about escape rooms because it spoke to kids on a level that is completely natural for them. They grew up on games. They grew up communicating and collaborating online with people to solve puzzles, to organize themselves into different groups. All these skills suddenly made sense to them. And so I went, oh, okay, I got to pursue this. So my friend, my Black Widow friend, Andrew Mason, introduced me to Professor Ashok, and they are doing fourth-year biology, or she's doing fourth-year biology at University of Toronto. So she said, let's give it a go. So, and I'm thinking biology, like it's the worst possible one to start with. Like, how do you do a biology escape room? Good luck, kids. You know, but I thought, if this works, they're all going to work. Because whenever I spoke to someone about this whole idea of escape room learning, they all go like, oh, you could do, and anything they're interested in, they would apply to escape rooms. And it worked. So I thought, biology, this will be good. And sure enough, one of the other things, I should mention Lance Carr as well. So Lance is another gentleman who I met in my internet travels. Lance is confined to a wheelchair. He can't move. He is a math teacher who had to sue his local school district to get the job because he graduated top of his class, and then they hired the guy below him to take his place. And he's like, dude, what's going on? They're like, yeah, ramps, you know, it's a pain. Anyways, so he's basically forced to become an activist, as many people with disabilities are forced to. And so I thought, well, how great would it be if we just started like creating these things with accessibility from the ground up? Because the reality is, everyone complains about accessibility. It's because you have to add it on at the end. That's why it's expensive. If you just take it into account from the very beginning, it's just very easy. Just make the door wider. You just think about where, you know, where people's eye levels are and stuff like that. And especially with escape room puzzles, the wonderful thing about escape rooms is the more diverse, the better the people you get in the room. You have all the old white guys in a room, they're never getting out because they're arguing and they're all thinking things about the same way. When you bring in a group of different people and put them in an escape room, it is amazing. Everyone gets to shine in their own way. Everyone gets to sort of to explore and use the tools and techniques that work for them. So I got the three of them together. We created these puzzles, and the assignment was that they had to create 3 puzzles that relate to science communication in biology for high school kids. And it was amazing to watch, because the first thing we did was make them do an escape room at school. We did one of these like little mail-in escape room things, and I've been doing them with kids at the community center before, and some of my Tech Bandit stuff. They were the complete opposite of the kids in high school. Kids in high school tearing everything open, trying everything, gluing things, cutting things, like, it's not working. It's just, you know, complete chaos. These people were like carefully folding, sitting back, debating what should be open next, to the point where the professor was like, oh, for God's sake, try something. Just try something. And she was pointing out that one of the things that she struggled with is, well, 2 things actually. One of them is that this siloed learning, that they're in there for biology. The idea that well, they're here to study biology. I don't need to tell a story. I don't need to solve a puzzle. It's not in the textbook. What do I do? And it was extraordinary how some people just blossomed when they got this opportunity. There was, oh my God, the COVID virus is mutated. It now causes zombies. You know, it's COVID-Z. You know, so there was COVID-Z that had to be solved. They had a series of locked boxes that they had to undo. They had to decipher the cryptic codes that had been left behind by a mad genius who had 2 possible strains of the virus and stuff. Just incredibly creative stuff to play with. And a lot of people going, oh God, this isn't in the book. You know, so it was really, there were some people who loved it and a lot of people who hated me for showing up and doing that. And I had the privilege of sort of getting in there and talk to them about it as well. And I've since started just doing escape rooms everywhere. I was in Prague a couple weeks ago, and we went in and did one, and I loved it so much, I said, can we do the next one? We literally did 2 escape rooms in a row, my poor family, just trying to get out of escape rooms together. But it's amazing because it's such an interesting insight into the way people think and the culture, and in Prague, they're all handmade. There's very little purchasing of existing rooms like there is in North America. It's all hand-built stuff. And what a great opportunity for kids. I saw that escape rooms were being used in class already, but it was only to solve them, right? So they're presented a puzzle, they solve it, they move on. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the problem. They need to build the puzzles. We need to Why not teach them some stuff and then have them come up with a puzzle around that? That is what I'm pushing for. And I have this maybe silly vision of this stuff now, where what if, instead of school plays, which are kind of exclusionary, it's like you're either an actor or you enjoy rigging stages and pointing lights and cueing stuff. No offense, guys, you're doing a fantastic job. Yeah, but it's basically two groups of people. In an escape room, you have this opportunity to find a community, to sort of fall into a group with the people who have the same interest as you. You're a physics nerd. Great, you're working on the puzzles. The physics puzzles. If you're into film and TV, great. You're filming little components for the game. You're an actor. You're talking probably. But again, you get to play a character. You want to paint scenery? Fantastic. There's so many different points of entry and so many different connections to curriculum that you could make. I have this dream that perhaps we could be doing escape rooms like we do school plays, because I think they're going to bring together a lot more people, and I think they're going to make a much bigger impact on the kids' future. One of the things I think that saved me, well, two things. One, my dad kicked me out, which is probably the smartest thing. I'd probably still be living at home. And the other thing is, I found a group of film nerds when I was 13 or 14 years old, and we got into trouble by making films. We just started making films at 13, 14 years old. I still work with them today. I already mentioned one today, Cabinet of Curiosities. Cube was another project we worked together on. I still work with those people. They're still my friends. I still talk to them every week in a chat. We still work together. That is invaluable. Like, you get a group of kids who are into the same thing working together. You can't beat it. I mean, that is, that's the kind of that's the kind of peer interaction you want. So that is what I'm hoping to do with the escape room learning side of stuff. I welcome people to send me an email. Let me know what you're doing. Let me know what your elevator pitch is. Try your elevator pitches on me. I want to hear them, because there may be something there that maybe I could talk further to, and perhaps we could maybe introduce it to some of the tech bandits and to the world in general. And if not, just enjoy the process of creating and telling your own stories. I have an email of awesomeness, as I call it. It says weekly. It's sort of random. But basically, my idea is just to find science and technology stories and a little bit about my own adventures in lifelong learning and sharing that on a regular basis. I just found that my time on formerly Twitter was eating up a lot of time and making me very miserable. And I thought, you know what? Why don't, instead of just scratching the surface, why don't I dig a little deeper and start reading the newsletters that I've subscribed to, and potentially actually sharing some of the stuff that's going on there. So running a little short, but potentially people have some questions or comments they want to make. This would be the time to do it. It's so funny. Sorry, one more thing. Reminds me, I've got Ari and Cindy here, and I keep thinking of this. I had to audition for a friend's film once, and he sat behind the camera, and as I acted, he would go. And eventually I had to say, could you just go away? Like, it's so, but you guys have been amazing. Your smiles have been incredible. And again, thank you for making this happen. It's just amazing. So, yeah. Thank you very much. I don't want to stand between you and coffee, but if anyone's got any questions, or again, if anyone's got stuff they're working on that they want to mention, please let me know, because I'd love to hear about it.
So we have microphones in the aisle, but before we take Santa, you can stand up. That's fine. We have in our exhibit hall, we have a poster program, and we have over 60 people who are participating. One of them is a high school student.
Woohoo!
And his poster is poster number 32. Its title is Detection of Heart Sound Abnormality Using Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning. He's not here in person, so he recorded a YouTube video presentation.
Wow.
And the link for it is in the app, so you can see his video. I think that's amazing that a high school student has found BioIT to engage with all of you in our community to prove that there is interest at that level, and there's others, and we need to reach out to them. Santha.
Wow.
Fantastic. I'm in awe of that. And my question is probably.
No, just stand behind it.
Oh, yeah, sorry. What am I doing?
Okay.
So, Dan, fantastic, fantastic talk, right?
Oh, thank you.
What can I say? I have twin girls, one of whom is a drama queen and one of whom is a nerd, right? So they are at this point where they may find their own escape routes, right? And I want to kind of prevent that from happening for at least some % of the time.
Good luck.
Right. So every time I engage with them, the CPU here is always thinking of how would I bring drama and science or tech or something together, and somewhere you will see me hooked on to all of what you have and maybe talk to you and see how we can make this happen. Maybe people have thought through this, but it'd be great to engage in a conversation with you and anyone else who may be interested in how we bring all of this together.
Fantastic. It's much harder with your own kid, I've got to say. It's easier with other kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I will just find the medium and have someone else play with it.
Right, right.
I will not do it myself. So,
It's like, don't teach them to drive, is the other one. Yeah, let someone else do that.
which brings me to this topic of social skills. How do you see social skills evolving in a time where, you have AI, you have all these technologies that could pretend to be these new people in your lives in some way, let you go into your escape routes? Will I'm sure they will evolve to be something different, say 20 years from now, or 10 even years, and just your reflections on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know. I struggle with it myself a lot. The problem with getting older is you go like, oh God, so much time wasted. There was an amazing YouTube video about the amount of time. This guy did this whole, I wish I had the link to it, but basically had a chart of dots, and they were each the months left in your life, basically. Depressing. That's what you do at night. And basically, he started just scratching them off. What was taking, how much is sleeping and going to the bathroom and eating and all these things. And then it left this chunk. And then he brought in social media. And all of a sudden, there's this tiny, if you're 18 years old now and you're on social media, this tiny little chunk of time that is now free because you've all this huge amount of time that you spend on social media. I mean, again, not to demonize it, because the reality is, I mean, we were just talking about this before your amazing chat. The idea that we're so eager to say this is a problem, instead of going like, how do we use it to help? How do we teach with it? Instead of trying to catch people cheating, how do we use it to teach people? So I feel like there's a big push, and I don't know where I fall on this exactly, but there's like a big push to remove cell phones from school. Except that we use cell phones. Like, we use cell phones all the time. I know we're not good at managing it all the time, but neither are grown-ups. So I feel like we need to, I don't think just unequivocally accept all the technologies, but I feel like we just have to figure out how to make it, how to sort of guide them towards using it in a sensible way. That's all we can do. Also, I think legislation is going to come to play in this stuff as well, which I think is somewhat useless because kids are amazing at getting around this stuff. So, sorry, I'm not really answering your question, but I feel like let the kids show us, because I think there's a tendency, certainly as a parent, to go like, the fear, the mind killer, right? I resort to that all the time, and I'm literally doing a talk about it, and I'm doing it all the time. If you let the kid explain stuff, you could just sort of like subtly go, oh, okay, well that's interesting. What about this? What about that? And just sort of, and like I say, it's so much easier with other kids than it is with your own kids. Your own kids just have a natural no response, so. Yeah, but I've got 2 twins living in my basement, by the way. My sister's kids are in the basement. So, and I was worried about them. They are both getting like 90s at U of T now. So, I did nothing. Yeah.
Asha, go.
Hi, my name is Asha. As heard earlier, I work at DNA Nexus in my sort of daytime. But on the side, one of the things I'm really passionate about is being a space health research advocate.
Oh, wow.
as we know, like there's space exploration is happening today. It's not a thing of the future at all. And there's an institution that's sponsored by NASA and Baylor College of Medicine, and I sit on that board, and we fund research that's specifically to better understand biology in space.
Oh, fantastic.
And I think this is it's an extremely underfunded area, and again, because we're going to space today and expanding that with more civilians in space than ever, it's just a really key need for our industry to really get more people focusing on understanding biology and the impacts of long-term, even low orbit as well as sort of deep orbit space exploration. With your background and your passion, I was just really interested if you've ever been involved in this or
That sounds
would
amazing.
like to be involved.
I would love to. I absolutely love to. I mean, I think it's fantastic. Yeah, space is wonderful. Like it's like crack for learning. You know, the kids there's so many different elements that the kids are drawn to with that. And I'm always struggling. You know, we were talking about possibly, next year doing some kind of a sort of a tech bandits like aspect to the bio and IT side of stuff. It's really hard to find things. It's very hard to find bio stuff to do with kids. I mean, it's not hard to find. It's hard to find stuff that is accessible, that's easy, that sort of resonates with the kids. It's so much easier to go to robots and sort of more immediate things, 3D printing and all that sort of fancy stuff. So yeah, bio is something I'd love to, and I think from space would be amazing. Yeah, thank you. I'd love to get in touch if that's possible. Yeah. See? Perfect. I was always a nerd who knows a nerd. It's fantastic.
So we have time for 2 more questions, but before I go to, I'll come, your question number 2. I was one of the co-founders of the Women in Bio Boston about 10 years ago. And part of Women in Bio has a subgroup called Young Women in Bio that brings middle school girls in grades 5 to 8 into laboratories. So we partnered with a pharma company in Cambridge where we held a career day. So the scientists presented to the girls what inspired them in science. They ran PCR experiments on M&Ms, and we had a pizza party. So there are groups out there like that. There's also partnership opportunities with David and the Tech Bandits, where you can think about what you're doing in your companies and your organizations that have cool stories to tell, and how do you bring those out into the world to those kids to inspire them to pursue science. Happy to talk with you myself, but Dave is also happy to talk with you as well.
Absolutely.
So 2 last questions. We'll take this one in the aisle, and then we'll come to Kumar.
So thank you very much for bringing up the problem of the relationship between the public perception technology versus government policy making. So my name is Renshi Fu. I'm a graduate student at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and I'm co-teaching a class called Ethics and Policy in Data Science. Oh, wow. And we have a group of students who analyzed EU AI Act. And it is going to be a very influential regulation for AI. So one thing is that it's really centered on risk assessment for AI. And after I led my student going through the arguments of people participating in arguing for this piece of legislation, we find that by setting the focus on risk, we're really disadvantaging innovation because people are just freak out because of this focus on risk. Like everything is about risk about AI. So I don't know if that's the question, but I really appreciate that you bring that up. And also, one thing is that we asked the group of students to vote after this big discussion on a EU AI Act.
Oh,
and we say, do you agree with these people who support heavy-handed regulation of AI, or do you support people to say we should rethink and think about what's the relationship of innovation and risk? And people were all like, I think we asked them vote. All of the students, except one, stand with people supporting heavy regulations.
Yeah.
So it's
Really?
it's it's a college student in their junior or sophomore year.
Who are
So I'm very,
they're pro heavy legislation.
yes,
Really?
yes. So I just want to bring this up with the context to show how important the thing you're talking about is super, super important.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. No, that's amazing. Yeah, it's worrying. I mean, it's the message, right? I mean, it's whatever message they get, and I think unless they have that critical thinking skills to think it through themselves, which I think are also sorely missing. You know, I think we're going to have you don't want an uneducated audience, you know, making decisions on this stuff, especially all the old white guys. You know what I mean? Yes.
So we have one last question before we release you to the exhibit hall. So Kumar.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
Excellent talk, David. I could see, I have 2 teenagers, and I could see just their lifeline story playing what you were talking about, and great story. So my question is not a smart question like others, but maybe one more story that you can share. There was a slide which was there which sort of caught my attention with the Neil deGrasse, where he took the ducks at home. Yeah. Everybody's talking. I don't know if you can go back to that slide, but you have this plate full of food. You are the only one.
What was that?
There was a plate full of food in your hand on that slide.
Oh.
I'm just curious, is there a story around it? Everybody's just chatting and talking, and you have that
Food. Let's see. Was
plate
this
full of food
the
there.
pancakes? Was it the pancakes?
Oh, the Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Oh, yeah. Well, my character liked eating a lot, as do I. Yes. So the premise is basically I'm smarter than both of them, and yes, and we were solving global warming by causing a terrible ice age. Basically, was what we were. That was it. Let's see if we go back to that so you can see again. There you go.
That's the one.
I chose every element on that plate, just so you know. Yeah. Yeah. So it's just this is Stargate and us just sort of playing with the idea of climate change. Of course, in Hollywood, climate change has to happen like this, otherwise you lose your audience. So you know, it's got to be much more sudden and impactful than it is in. Well, I say that. You know, let's see what happens in the next few years. But yeah, it's hopefully it'll make people think about it and also make good food choices, right, Cindy?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, David.
Thank
An
you.
inspiring talk and many takeaways for all of us.
Thank you.
Let's go to the exhibit hall and have a great rest of the day.